They said I was too old to matter, too old to fight back, too old to start over. My husband replaced me. Town tried to erase me. And everyone expected me to leave quietly. But what happens when a woman over 60 refuses to disappear? And her silence turns into a threat. Would you run? Or would you stay and burn everything they tried to steal from you? Before we begin, write your city and country in the comments. Subscribe to this channel. May those who subscribe be blessed with prosperity, good health, and ease in all matters. Amen. My name is Rosalind May Carter. I am 63 years old. I am a Black American woman who used to believe marriage meant safety. I believed that until the night of our wedding anniversary. My husband booked a restaurant. He invited our friends. He ordered champagne. He held my hand like he still loved me. I thought he was finally trying again, after years of cold silence that I kept excusing as stress, work, age, anything that made it easier to stay. Then he stood up with his glass and smiled at everyone. He said, after 25 years, one woman is enough. He said he wanted someone younger. He said he wanted his life back. And then he looked at me like I was furniture he was tired of seeing. People laughed at first because they thought it was a joke. I did not laugh. My face stayed still. My hands stayed still. I could feel blood rushing behind my ears, but I did not move. He kept talking. He said I should pack my things tomorrow. He said I should be grateful he was being honest. He said the apartment would be his, since he paid most of it. That last sentence was where he got careless. Because the apartment was mine. The deed was in my name. I did it years ago when he started disappearing for weekends and coming home smelling like another woman's perfume. I did it quietly without drama, because I still loved him and I did not want a war. I just wanted protection. That night he tried to humiliate me in public. He did not expect me to stand up and take the microphone from the singer. I told the room he was free to leave. I told the room the apartment was mine. I told the room I would not beg, and I would not fight over a man who already decided I was disposable. Nobody clapped. Nobody spoke. My husband stood there, frozen like he could not believe I had a backbone. I walked out alone. 2 weeks later, I boarded a flight with one suitcase, a folder of documents, and a heart that felt heavy but clear. I was not going to chase him. I was not going to bargain for my dignity. I chose Indonesia because my mother once told me about the kindness she felt when she visited as a young nurse. She said people could be strict, but they respected elders. I needed a place where my age would not be used as an insult every day. I did not go to a big city. I went to a small coastal town called Teluk Manggis. When I arrived, the air was hot and wet. The road from the airport was narrow. Motorbikes passed us like they owned the world. Small shops stood close together with bright signs and faded paint. I watched everything through the car window and tried to imagine a new life that did not include explaining myself to anyone. The boarding house was owned by a woman named Sari Wulandari. She was 38, a widow, and polite in a way that felt careful. Her hijab was always neat. Her eyes were calm, but I could tell she noticed everything. She showed me my room. It was clean, simple, and quiet. A bed, a fan, a small table, and a bathroom with a bucket and dipper. I did not complain. I had slept on worse when I was young and working double shifts. Sari said, "If you need anything, tell me." Thanked her. I gave her the rent in cash. She looked surprised, then relieved. That first evening I took a walk. I wore a loose linen dress and a scarf over my silver locks. I wanted to blend in as much as possible, but I could feel eyes on me anyway. Not hostile, just curious. Children stared openly. A few women looked at my hair like they were trying to decide if it was beautiful or strange. Near a small food stall, I heard laughter behind me. I understood enough Baisa to catch the words. Too old. Alone. Foreign. One woman said she is too old to start over. Another said maybe she is here because nobody wants her there. They did not whisper quietly. They did not realize I could understand some of it. They also did not seem to care. I stopped walking for a moment. My throat tightened. I wanted to turn around and say something sharp. Instead, I kept walking. I was not going to fight strangers on my first night. I told myself I came here for peace. But peace does not arrive just because you paid for a room. Back at the boarding house, Sari was in the living area folding towels. A small television played a soap opera. The sound was low. I could smell fried garlic from the kitchen. Sari looked up and asked, "Are you okay?" Said yes. Then I changed my mind and said, "People talk." She nodded once, like she had expected that answer. She said, "They talk about everyone. They will get used to you." I wanted to believe her. That night, I opened my suitcase and placed my folder of documents on the table. Passport, visa papers, my apartment deed, bank letters, my marriage certificate. Things that proved I existed because I had learned that when people want to erase you, paperwork is the only thing that argues back. My phone buzzed around midnight. An email from the United States. It was from a real estate attorney. The subject line made my chest go tight. Notice of sale intent. I read the message slowly. My ex-husband was attempting to sell the apartment. He claimed I had abandoned the property. He claimed he had full authority to move forward. I stared at the screen. My hand started shaking, then stopped. My face went cold. He was not satisfied with leaving me. He wanted to take the last thing that belonged to me. I saved the email. I forwarded it to my own lawyer. I took screenshots. I wrote down the time. Then there was a knock at my door. Froze. I did not expect anyone at that hour. Another knock, softer. I opened the door a few inches. Sari stood there, holding an envelope. Her expression was tense. She said, "This came for you today, but I forgot. I'm sorry. I remembered just now." I took the envelope. It was a plain white letter with an official stamp. My name was printed in careful letters. I thanked her and closed the door. My heart beat hard as I opened it. Inside was a notice in Indonesian. I understood enough to feel the meaning before I fully translated it with my phone. It was about my stay permit. Said there was a review. Said I might need to report to an office in town. Said my permit might not be renewed. I sat on the edge of the bed holding the letter. I had just arrived. Had paid rent. I had done everything properly. I thought about the women laughing outside. I thought about how quickly a town can decide you do not belong. I thought about my husband smiling in that restaurant, sure that I would break. I put the letter beside the email printout. Then I heard voices outside the boarding house, low and male. I could not catch the words clearly, but I heard my name said once, in a tone that was not friendly. I turned off the light and sat in the dark, listening. I did not sleep that night. Every sound felt louder in the dark. Motorbikes passing. A door closing somewhere. The fan creaking above my head. I kept replaying the restaurant scene in my mind, then the email, then the letter about my permit. It felt like my old life had reached across the ocean and grabbed my ankle. Morning arrived without apology. At 6, the call to prayer echoed through the town. It was calm, steady, and beautiful. I sat up in bed and listened. For a moment I felt grounded. The sound reminded me that this place had its own rhythm, and I was just learning to step into it. I washed, dressed simply, and went outside. The boarding house courtyard was small, with potted plants and a narrow path leading to the gate. Sari was already awake, sweeping leaves like she did it every morning without thinking. She greeted me politely. I asked her about the letter. Her face changed just a little. Not shock. More like concern mixed with caution. She said sometimes they review foreigners, especially if people complain. I asked, complain about what? She hesitated, then answered carefully. About presence. About behavior. About staying too long. He nodded. I understood what she was not saying. Complaints did not need reasons. They just needed discomfort. After breakfast, I walked into town to find the local office mentioned in the letter. The streets were busier now. Vendors selling fruit. School children laughing. Men drinking coffee and smoking, watching everything that passed. I felt eyes follow me again. At the office, a man behind a desk took my papers without smiling. He flipped through them slowly, like time was his personal property. Another man stood near the door, arms crossed. The first man said my name wrong. I corrected him politely. He asked how long I planned to stay. I told him the truth. I did not know yet. He nodded and said that can be a problem. I asked what kind of problem. He said people here prefer stability. I said I preferred stability too. That was why I left chaos behind. He did not react. He stamped something and told me to wait for further notice. Outside, the sun was already harsh. I felt sweat run down my back. I stood there for a moment, breathing slowly, reminding myself not to panic. Panic makes mistakes. I had learned that from nursing and from marriage. On my way back, I stopped at a small coffee stall. An older woman served me. She smiled, asked where I was from. Her smile faded slightly when I answered. She said, "You are brave to come here alone at your age." It sounded like a compliment and a warning at the same time. Back at the boarding house, I met Yvonne for the first time. She was sitting on the front steps, wearing bright patterned pants and a loose shirt that showed her arms proudly. Her hair was short, gray, and natural. She laughed loudly into her phone, then looked up and saw me. She said, "Well damn. Another one of us." And blinked. "Another what?" She stood up, walked closer, and looked me up and down without apology. She said, "Black. American. Over 60. Running from something or someone." I laughed despite myself. Said both. She introduced herself and told me she had been living in Telekmangis for 4 years. She said she came for peace too, then snorted like she did not fully believe in the word anymore. We sat together and talked. She did most of the talking, but she listened too. She told me about the town, who mattered, who pretended to matter, and who smiled while quietly pushing people out. She told me foreigners were tolerated when they spent money and stayed invisible. Old women who asked questions made people nervous. That night, she invited me to her place for dinner. It was a small rented house near the edge of town. She cooked collard greens with local spices and laughed at her own experiments. Over dinner, I told her about the letter and the email. Her face hardened. She said, "They think you will leave quietly." I asked what happens if I do not. She looked at me for a long moment, then said, "Then they test you." On my walk back, I noticed something I had missed before. Small signs of pressure. A shop owner who suddenly claimed not to have change. A neighbor who shut her door when she saw me. A man on a motorbike who slowed down just enough to stare. When I reached the boarding house, Sari was waiting for me. Her hands were clasped tightly in front of her. She said, "Pak Arman wants to meet you tomorrow." I asked who that was. She said, "He is one of the leaders here." Her voice was polite, but her eyes were worried. I thanked her and went to my room. I sat at the table and opened my folder again. I checked every document. I made copies. I scanned everything into my phone. I wrote down names and dates. I was not young, but I was not careless. Before bed, my phone buzzed again. A message from my lawyer in the United States. Short. Professional. Do not worry. He has no legal standing. We will handle it. I exhaled slowly. Then another message came in. From an unknown number. It said, "Sometimes it is better to let go." I stared at the screen, then turned the phone face down. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. I thought about how quickly peace turns into a test. I thought about how often women are told to disappear quietly for the comfort of others. I closed my eyes and made a decision without announcing it to anyone. I was not leaving yet. The next morning, Pak Arman arrived at the boarding house just after 9. He did not come alone. 2 men followed him, younger, quieter, and dressed like people who wanted to look official without being questioned. Sari greeted them politely and asked them to sit. She offered tea. Pak Arman accepted with a smile that never reached his eyes. He introduced himself like I should already be grateful to know his name. He spoke slowly, carefully, like every word had been practiced. He said Telekmangis was a peaceful town. He said the people valued harmony. He said newcomers needed to understand local sensitivity. I listened without interrupting. He asked why I chose this town. I told him I wanted a quiet place to rest and live respectfully. I said I followed the rules and paid my rent on time. He nodded, then said, "Some residents feel uncomfortable." I asked, "With what exactly?" He paused, then said, "With change." I said I was not changing anything. I stayed in my room. I bought food locally. I did not cause trouble. He smiled again. He said, "Sometimes presence alone is enough." That was when I understood. This was not about paperwork. This was about permission. About knowing my place. He mentioned my permit review again. He said cooperation would make things easier. I asked what cooperation meant. He said perhaps considering a different town. Or a shorter stay. I thanked him for his honesty. I said I would think about it. He stood up, shook my hand lightly and left. His men followed without looking back. As soon as the gate closed, Sari apologized. She said she did not want problems. She said people were talking more since I arrived. I told her I understood. I did not blame her. But things changed after that visit. The woman who sold me breakfast stopped greeting me. A shop owner suddenly raised his prices when I approached. Children who used to wave now stared and whispered. The town did not shout at me. Squeezed. One afternoon I noticed a small note slipped under my door. No name. Just words written in uneven handwriting. Old people should rest at home. I folded the note and put it in my bag. That evening Yvonne came over. She took one look at my face and said, "It started, didn't it?" I showed her the note. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. She told me this was how they worked. Not with violence. With pressure. With isolation. With the hope that I would decide leaving was my own idea. She asked me if I was scared. Said yes. Then I said no. Then I said I was tired of being pushed. The next day my bank app would not load. I tried again. And again. Called the number. After a long wait, a voice told me there was a temporary security review due to unusual activity overseas. I knew what that meant. More waiting. More vulnerability. At night I opened my laptop and watched a video someone sent me. It was my ex-husband's new wife. Meh. Smiling into the camera. She talked about self-care, new beginnings, and letting go of bitterness. She did not say my name, but she did not have to. The comments were cruel. Some defended her. Some mocked me. I closed the video and turned off the screen. I sat there in the dark and realized something important. They expected me to shrink. They expected me to choose silence because it was easier than resistance. But silence had already cost me 25 years. The next morning I went to the market with my head high. I spoke politely. I paid exact change. I looked people in the eye. Some ignored me. And watched. A few older women watched longer than the others. One of them followed me part of the way back. She wore a faded dress and sandals worn thin. Her hair was pulled back tightly. She stopped me and asked, "You are the foreign woman, yes?" Said yes. She said, "They talk about you." They talked about me too, once. She did not wait for a response. She just walked away. I stood there holding my bag, heart beating fast. I understood then that this town was not just testing me. It was watching to see if I would break. I began to notice them after that. The women who did not look away. They were not loud. They were not curious like the others. They watched quietly from stalls, doorways, and benches. Older women. Widows. Women whose backs were slightly bent, not from age alone, but from years of carrying things nobody thanked them for. One morning, the woman who had stopped me before appeared again. She sat beside me at the market without asking. She said her name was Rukmini. She said she used to own land near the river. She said it was gone now. She did not explain how. She did not need to. She asked me where I was from and how long I planned to stay. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were sharp. I told her I did not know. She nodded like she understood that answer very well. Over the next few days, more women found reasons to sit near me, to speak to me briefly, to test my reaction. They asked small questions. How old I was, if I had children, if my husband was alive. When I said no, he left. Their faces changed in small ways. Not pity. Recognition. Yvonne noticed it too. She said, "They are deciding if you are worth trusting." Trust came slowly. It started with stories told in pieces. A land certificate that changed hands. A signature added without understanding. A husband who promised protection and delivered silence. One afternoon, Rukmini came to the boarding house. She asked if I could help read a document. Her hands shook slightly when she handed it to me. It was a contract, written in formal language. The kind meant to confuse people who trusted too easily. I read it slowly. Then I explained what it meant. Her land was never meant to be temporary. The clause that allowed it to be taken had been hidden in plain sight. She did not cry. She just closed her eyes and sat very still. More women came after that. They brought papers, old receipts, letters from offices that never replied. They asked me to explain, to translate, to help them understand what had already been decided without them. I did not promise miracles. I promised clarity. Words spread quietly. Not through gossip, through need. Sari noticed the visits. One evening she pulled me aside. Her voice was low. She said people were asking why so many women came to see me. She said Pak Arman had noticed. I thanked her for warning me. I told her I would be careful. But careful was no longer enough. One night I found my door unlocked. Nothing was missing. My documents were untouched. The message was clear. The next day, Sari's hands shook as she poured tea. She told me someone had visited her office. They asked about my payments, about my activities, about how long I planned to stay. She said if trouble continued, her business license could be reviewed. She did not ask me to leave. She did not have to. That evening I packed my suitcase. I folded my clothes slowly. I placed my documents neatly inside. I did not cry. Crying felt like giving something away. Yvonne came over and saw the suitcase. She did not stop me. She just sat on the bed and said, "Sometimes leaving is not weakness. Sometimes it is strategy." He nodded. Believed that too. Before bed, I wrote messages to the women I had helped. Short ones. Simple ones. I told them thank you. I told them to keep copies of everything. I lay down, ready to leave in the morning. At dawn there was a knock on my door. Not loud. Not urgent. Just firm. I opened it and found Sari standing there. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. She said someone from Jakarta called last night. She said the call was about land disputes in this area. She said names were mentioned. She said mine was one of them. I sat down slowly. The town had been watching me. Now someone else was watching the town. I unpacked my suitcase and left it open on the floor. I did not put anything back neatly. I wanted to be ready for either direction. Sari sat across from me, hands folded, waiting for me to speak first. I could see fear in her eyes but also something else. Relief mixed with worry. Like she was glad the silence had been broken, even if she did not know what would follow. She told me the call came from a legal aid office in Jakarta. They asked about land ownership changes in Teluk Manggis. They asked about documents that had been rewritten over the years. They asked about women who had complained quietly and then stopped coming. They asked about me. I asked Sari why they would mention my name. She said someone had submitted copies of documents. Many copies. With explanations. With notes. With timelines. I knew then it was not one woman. It was several. They had gathered what they had. They had taken the risk together. That day the visits stopped. No women came to my room. No notes slipped under my door. No men lingered too long outside the gate. The town felt unusually quiet, like it was holding its breath. In the afternoon, Pak Arman sent a message asking to meet again. I did not reply. Yvonne came by with groceries and news. She said people were nervous. She said someone from the district office was asking questions. She said Pak Arman had cancelled a public event without explanation. She also said my name was being spoken carefully now. That evening, Sari knocked on my door again. Her voice was shaking this time. She said someone had told her that if I stayed, her business would suffer. She said inspections could happen. Permits could be delayed. Problems could be created. She apologized again, her head lowered. I told her to look at me. I told her I would leave so she would not be hurt. Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. That night I packed properly. I zipped the suitcase. Charged my phone. I booked a ride for the next morning. I did not tell the women. I did not want them to feel responsible. At dawn, I carried my suitcase into the courtyard. The sky was pale. The air was heavy. I felt older than I had in years, not because of my body, but because of the weight of repeating the same story. Move quietly. Make yourself smaller. Leave before someone gets hurt. The car arrived late. While I waited, my phone rang. It was a number from Jakarta. A woman introduced herself as a lawyer working with a legal aid organization. Her voice was calm, practiced, confident. She said, "Please do not leave yet." She said an investigation had officially started. She said testimonies were being reviewed. She said documents I helped explain had been submitted as evidence. She said my presence mattered. I sat on the suitcase and listened. She said I was protected for now. She said leaving could complicate things. She said staying would help keep the process transparent. I looked at Sari, who stood at the doorway watching me. I looked at the road. I looked at the open gate. I told the driver to wait. Then I told him to leave. I carried my suitcase back inside and placed it against the wall. I did not unpack it. That afternoon my ex-husband sent a message. It was short, angry, accusing. He said I was making trouble from far away. He said I was embarrassing him. He said I should stop before things got worse. I did not reply. The line between my old life and this new one was disappearing. The fight had followed me across the ocean, but it was no longer just mine. That night, for the first time since arriving, I slept deeply. The town did not feel safe. But it no longer felt quiet either. The lawyer arrived 3 days later. Her name was Inda Prameswary. She did not wear anything dramatic. Simple blouse, flat shoes, hair pulled back. She walked through the boarding house gate like she belonged anywhere she chose to stand. She greeted Sari politely, then turned to me and shook my hand firmly. She said, "Thank you for staying." We sat at the small table in the common area. Yvonne joined us without asking. Nobody told her to leave. Inda laid out folders one by one. Copies of land certificates, old contracts, letters sent and ignored. She spoke clearly, without emotion, like someone who had seen this pattern many times. She said land in Teluk Mangis had been quietly transferred over the years. Mostly from women. Mostly after their husbands died. Mostly without full explanation. She said Pak Arman's name appeared often. She said my role was simple but dangerous. I helped women understand what was taken from them. That made me visible. Later that day, Pak Arman was called to the district office. He did not smile when he passed the boarding house. He did not look at me. That evening, a message arrived from my lawyer in the United States. My ex-husband had officially filed paperwork to sell the apartment. His claim of abandonment was now under review for fraud. 2 fights, 2 countries, same pattern. I sat with Yvonne that night, drinking tea and listening to the town sounds change. Motorbikes slowed. Conversations stopped when we walked past. People were no longer testing me. They were measuring consequences. Inda warned me to be careful. She said power does not disappear quietly. She said pressure might increase before it breaks. The next morning, a notice appeared on the community board. A public meeting would be held regarding land issues. Attendance requested. Not required. Requested. That word mattered. Women came to my room again. This time they did not whisper. They asked questions openly. They asked what would happen next. I told them the truth. I said it would be slow. I said nothing was guaranteed. I said their voices mattered more than mine. They nodded. That night I received another message from an unknown number. It said, "You should remember you are a guest." I deleted it. I was no longer a guest in this story. I was a witness. The community hall was full before noon. Men sat in the front rows. Women stood near the walls or sat on the floor. The air was thick with heat and tension. Fans turned slowly, doing nothing to cool the room. I sat beside Yvonne near the middle. I wore a simple dress and kept my documents in a folder on my lap. Pak Arman arrived last. He walked in with confidence, but it felt thinner than before. His eyes scanned the room and skipped over me. That told me everything. The district officer opened the meeting. He spoke about fairness, transparency, and review. His words were careful. Then Inda stood. She spoke without raising her voice. She presented timelines. She read clauses aloud. She named patterns. She did not accuse. She demonstrated. One by one women stood. Rukmini stood first. Her hands shook, but her voice did not. She spoke about her land by the river. She spoke about signatures she did not understand. Another woman stood. Then another. The room changed. People stopped whispering. Men shifted in their seats. Pak Arman stared at the table in front of him. Inda asked if anyone wanted to respond. Silence. Then she nodded at me. I stood slowly. My knees felt weak, but my spine stayed straight. I spoke clearly. I spoke about what it means to be told you are too old to matter. I spoke about being pushed out politely. I spoke about how silence protects those who benefit from it. I did not shout. I did not insult anyone. When I finished, I sat down. Nobody clapped. But nobody laughed either. The district officer announced the investigation would continue. Temporary measures would be applied. Land transfers under review would be frozen. Pak Arman left without shaking hands. Outside, the sun was harsh. The women gathered together. Some cried quietly. Some smiled for the first time in years. Yvonne squeezed my hand. I did not feel victorious. Felt steady. The town felt different the morning after the meeting. Not peaceful. Not calm. Just exposed. People still went to the market. Shops still opened. Motorbikes still filled the road. But conversations stopped when certain names were mentioned. Smiles appeared slower. Authority no longer felt invisible. Pak Arman did not appear in public for days. A notice was posted outside the district office. He had stepped aside during the investigation. The words were formal, but the meaning was clear. He was no longer untouchable. Sari reopened her office fully. Inspectors came, but they were polite. They checked papers, nodded, and left. Her business license stayed valid. She thanked me quietly one evening while we washed dishes together. I told her she did not owe me anything. We both knew that was not entirely true. The women continued meeting. Not at my room anymore. They met in small groups. In houses. In open spaces. They spoke more freely now, though still carefully. Inda stayed another week. She collected statements. She guided people through steps they had never been shown before. She treated the women with respect, not charity. Before she left, she told me the process would be long. Some land might be returned. Some cases would settle quietly. Some would fail. She said change was not a straight line. I already knew that. News from the United States arrived in pieces. My ex-husband lost his attempt to sell the apartment. The claim of abandonment collapsed under documents and timelines. His lawyer advised him to settle quietly. Maya stopped posting. I did not feel joy about that. Felt closure. Yvonne celebrated by cooking too much food and inviting everyone she knew. Laughter filled her house. Music played softly. Women talked over each other. For a moment, Telek Mangi's felt almost warm. But not everyone was happy. One afternoon, a man I had never seen before approached me near the market. He did not threaten me. He did not insult me. He said, "You have made things complicated." I replied, "Things were already complicated." He walked away. I started receiving official letters instead of warnings. My permit was extended temporarily. Reviews would continue. Temporary had never sounded so solid. At night, I sat outside under the mango tree behind the boarding house. I listened to insects. I thought about my life before this place. The years of compromise. The quiet shrinking. I did not feel young. But I did not feel finished either. I stayed. Not because Telek Mangi's suddenly loved me. Not because everything was resolved. I stayed because I no longer felt like a mistake occupying space. The investigation continued quietly. Pak Arman resigned weeks later. No ceremony. No apology. Just absence. Some land returned to its owners. Some did not. Some women accepted compensation. Some walked away angry but louder than before. Sari expanded her boarding house. She added 2 rooms. She hired help. She laughed more easily now. Yvonne started teaching English to children in the evenings. She complained every day and showed up every day. I began helping at a small clinic. Not officially. Just organizing papers. Explaining forms. Sitting with people who were scared of offices and stamps. My permit was approved for a longer stay. My ex-husband signed the settlement. The apartment remained mine. We did not speak again. Life did not turn gentle, but it turned honest. I walked through town without lowering my eyes. Some people nodded now. Some still avoided me. That was fine. I did not come to Indonesia to be brave. Came to survive. Somewhere along the way, survival became something else. This story teaches that dignity does not expire with age. Many people believe life becomes smaller after 60, especially for women. This story shows the opposite. Experience, patience, and clarity can become strength when fear is no longer allowed to lead. It also teaches that silence protects injustice. Harm often continues not because people agree with it, but because they are tired, afraid, or made to feel small. Change begins when someone chooses to understand, to speak, and to stand, even quietly. Another lesson is that starting over does not always mean running away. Sometimes it means staying, facing pressure, and refusing to disappear. Respect is not given freely. It is often earned by refusing to surrender self-worth. Finally, the story reminds us that one person can open the door, but real change happens when many people step through together. Courage grows faster when it is shared. This story is a work of fiction. All characters, locations, and events are created to look real so the message can be felt more deeply. Any resemblance to real people or situations is unintentional. The purpose of this story is to deliver life lessons, not to present real events. Thank you for listening to this story. If you found it meaningful, please share your thoughts in the comments. Like the video if you enjoyed the story, and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this.